morning, my patron people. This is Jean here from Truelove Quilts for You. Thank you for contributing to my Patreon account and supporting me in my little YouTube venture here. I hope it's worth it. I hope it's worthwhile to you. I really do. I feel a little bit obligated. With my other one, no, I shouldn't say that. But you're so kind in supporting me monetarily. It's very, very nice. And as I said, I hope it's worth it. I'm doing a tutorial today, and somebody is going to be receiving this little bag here, little market bag that I've made. It's quite capacious. I've used a sort of shabby chic, pretty florally print with a lovely aqua lining. Just 2 pieces of fabric and a little piece for the handle. I do a full tutorial on it. I have boxed the corners of the bag to make it very substantial. Now I have not used a home deck fabric or a cotton duck, which you could use. I've used a quilting cotton, 100% quilting cotton for both my lining and my outside, and I'm telling you, it's a nice substantial bag. This the way I've made it. I've looked online. There's several tutorials. It's called an origami bag. There's all sorts of ways to make origami. It's folding triangles, and you end up with a very simple to make, very easy, quick project to make with just a couple yards of fabric. Nice little present, really, for a beach bag or taking stuff to your nana's house. It's quite big. You can get a couple towels in there and a bathing suit. Really quite nice. It goes over the back, over the shoulder, with a nice opening. Now I have, as I said, I was watching several tutorials. I've taken a little bit from here, a little bit from there. I have boxed the corners with a bias binding. As you might know, I like to use a double fold bias binding, and then my corners are really, my boxed corners really do make it more substantial. Sometimes slouchy bags can be a bit too slouchy. I mean, this one is quite nice. And again, I've used regular cotton fabric, and I tell you in my tutorial that you could have at the end point even attached at this point here, because it's a bit low to go over your arm. You could put a little bit of cording if you'd want to, a little bit of a self tie to tie that if you wanted it to be a bit more secure for yourself. But I envision this as going to the beach, just slinging a couple of loaves of bread down at the market. Nice substantial slouchy bag. So in a few weeks' time, somebody will be receiving this. I'll be doing a drawing on my from my patron list. If you don't want it, by all means let me know if you have no need for it, or if you wanted to gift it to somebody. Or whatever. If you don't, and I choose you, please let me know so I can choose somebody else. But I think I would like to get that. It's a nice little summery tote bag that I hope you enjoy the tutorial on. As I said, I've watched several videos. I put sort of my own spin on quite a few of them, and I've made it sort of my own. But it's a sweet little pattern that I'm sure you could make yourself. For presents. Nice gift, nice presents. You could do it in a seasonal fabric, or a holiday fabric, or a summery fabric, kit for school, plaid. You could do it in all sorts of ways. 3 pieces of material, literally. The bag, the lining, and this little piece. That's it. I give you the measurements and everything. So I hope you enjoy the tutorial to follow. And again, my sincere appreciation for your patronage. I don't know if you've been watching my YouTube channel or whenever I'm going to put this up. We've had a little bit of bad luck. We had a flood in our basement, and I got bronchitis again, acute bronchitis. I was urgent care this past weekend. Again, it's clearing up. I have to take my antibiotics actually. I tend to have a weak chest. And you probably have noticed if you're watching my YouTube, I have a dry cough all the time, which isn't a good thing. They did a chest x-ray. It's a bit hazy, whatever that means, but I don't have pneumonia or anything like that. There's a lot of lint in this room. I'm very aware of that. I have a filter, a HEPA filter. Probably doesn't. My lungs are probably filled with lint. Because I was thinking, oh my word, like my sewing machine gets filled with lint, my lungs, whatever. So I have this cough. I'm going to die because of my craft. No, I'm not. My chest again. This is funny. You got to keep laughing, right? So anyway, there's my little tutorial. I hope you enjoy it, folks. And again, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Bye. So I'm going to be making my nice little slouchy market bag. I'm using a quilting cotton, just regular quilting cotton, but if you wanted it a bit more substantial, you could use a home deck fabric to make it a little bit heavier. But I find this quilting cotton, it makes a nice slouchy bag, but the way I reinforce everything, it's a nice strong little bag also. It's not that little. It can hold a couple towels going to the beach, or going down to the market for several loaves of bread and whatever. Nice substantial bag the way I make it. Now what you're going to be making is you just need 2 pieces of fabric. Well, you need three pieces of fabric. You need your top fabric, your outside fabric, and then you need a lining fabric. I've chosen this. I think it's so summery and delightful that one of you are going to get. You're going to be cutting the top, your bag and your lining pieces. You're going to be cutting them 19 inches across, and both of them are 56 inches long. Okay? Then, out of the lining, or another contrasting, I could have used a hot pink perhaps for the little handle at the top, you're going to be cutting a piece 4 inches by 7 inches. That's for the little handle for later. So we have our 2 pieces, 19 by 56 long. Now, what you're wanting to do is, with the right sides together of these both pieces of fabric, right sides together, I'm going to sew. I have a stripe, so it doesn't matter where my pattern goes. I'm just going, you can pin this if you want. I'm going to pin this along here, and I'm going to sew right along all the way around my bit here, about 1/2 inch. I'm going to sew all the way around. But what I am going to do is I'm going to start at the top here, and I'm going to pin in. I'm going to pin about 4 inches right in the top middle. Well, that's not the top. right about there. An opening. Leave about 4 or 5 inches right there at the top. I'm going to leave an opening here. Now, what I'm going to do is, I won't bore you. I'm going to start stitching from here, this pin, to the corner, and I'm going to go all the way around, all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to come down to the bottom, make a nice sharp curve. I'm going to come up to this top here and come over to this pin here, reinforcing. Now, if you've seen me before and you've watched my YouTube, you know when I make things like this, I'm going to do this again. I'm going to go over that stitching. I reinforce my stitching so much. My things never come apart because I think you're putting weight on one seam. Two rows of stitching is going to be even stronger. So right over the top, I'm going to go over once, all the way around to this point, all the way around, and then I'm going to go over it again all the way around, and then I'll be back. So as you can see, I've stitched all the way around from the top all the way around, and I've done that twice. Now, just to eliminate a little bit of the bulk, I'm just going to cut off these corners just a little bit. Careful not to clip the stitching on all 4 corners, just to eliminate a slight bit of bulk there. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to put our hand in here and turn this inside out. Turn the whole thing inside out, poking out our 4 corners then. And then I'm going to go over to my ironing board and I'm going to sew this. I'm going to press it really well. So I'll turn this inside out. And then we'll have a nice, pardon me, this cough. Oh, this bronchitis. Never mind. One corner. Oops. You get the idea. So I'm just going to poke these corners out. I find pressing or ironing in this case all along the whole time that you do it makes it just any project just so nice. I mean, I guess you could just, you know, flatten it out, but I just love to go over and give it a nice iron, even a spritz with a bit of starch, pull these seams out so they're nice and crisp. So that's what I'm going to do now. And on the top edge here where I have the opening, I'll just sort of iron that together, and so it just sort of, you know, fades into nothingness, because then the next step we're going to be top stitching. So here is my lovely flat two-piece lined strip of fabric here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over and I'm going to, about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge there, I'm going to top stitch all the way around my piece here. So just starting at the top corner, put my presser foot down, back stitch a bit, just going to top stitch right around my fabric here. This is where my opening is, and you can see I've just pressed them together, and boom, it's closed. So we have our lovely piece of fabric here, and all nice and top stitched around the edges, and we're bringing it the proper side up, the side that your bag is showing up. Now what I want you to do is, what we're going to do is, hopefully I won't be in the way here, we're going to take this top right and we're going to bring this triangle down, holding the corner there. It matches up beautifully. Just lay that down there. You're going to create a triangle like that. Let me just see that. Right, okay, so this top corner comes down to here, and it matches this side, this edge right along to that point on the corner. So just shush this down a little bit, put this in the frame, and then what we're going to do here, we're going to take the bottom left, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take it up to the top, holding that corner there, and then just keeping that straight along there. So we have these two opposite triangles. And in the middle, if you can imagine, we have a square. Okay? We have a square right here. Now, if you can imagine this square here on the diagonal, okay, what we're going to be doing is we're just going to take this piece out, we're going to take this, am I in the frame? I keep thinking, am I in the frame? Am I in the frame? We're going to take this piece here and we're just going to fold it up to the diagonal. Just holding that. We're going to fold that on that diagonal, and it's sort of going to match right here. Those two edges are together. You can sort of feel there's a point here. These edges are here, and that is there. So what we've created is a fairly large triangle and a fairly small triangle. Okay? You got that? You're going to, now, what we're going to do, it's funky with my, I'm going to come over here. What we're going to do is we're going to lift up this edge here, and we're going to lift up this edge here, being careful not to pin the bottom. We're going to sort of make this fold here, make sure that this fold, this edge here, is straight with the bottom. You're going to pick up that edge there of this piece, and we're going to pin that. We're going to just pin, making sure you're not catching the bottom. I'm going to pin it this way. It makes more sense this way for me. And I'm going to go right, pinching it together. The beauty of this little tote bag is there are zero raw seams. You're going to go right to the end of that fold, that pinched fold. Okay, so there's one seam. Let's see if that's in the, yeah. So there's one seam. Now we're going to very carefully pinch it, hold it. We're going to carefully turn it over. This point doesn't matter if it's a little bit wonky because your folds get a little bit creased, but you're just going to make sure that this point, this this edge here is straight with that edge there, and everything will match up. Now you're just sort of going to pull this, again, do the exact same thing, making sure that this is the most important part here. You're going to lift this bit up right there, pinching it, and then pinning it. The important part is right here. And then just smoothing it right as you go down to this point over here. Again, being careful not to catch the body of the bag underneath. And then pin and then go right off that lovely point. Okay? Now what I'm going to do, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my machine and I'm going to start and I'm going to sew this seam right here. And I'm really going to reinforce this area right here because there's a lot of strain on this area right here. I'm going to go back and forth, of course, go down probably just a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm going to go back down again. And I'm going to do that on these both funky seams. I'm going to do that on those both seams. That top there, we're assured that that's there. I'm going to go right down to that seam there, reinforcing both of the seams. So here is the seam that on my phone, isn't that funny? Here's the seam that I've just pinned very carefully. All the edges are together. I'm starting at the top, and I am back stitching this here. I am back stitching, and then we're basically making an incredibly reinforced French seam. Incredibly reinforced. My bags, you get sick of my bags before they would ever rip or wear out, because I really reinforce my stitches. I think if one set of stitches is good on a handbag, then 2 or 3 are even better. As you can see, because of the importance of pinning, it makes a nice sturdy seam right off. And then I will go back and I will stitch again. And you can hear it's going through a lot of seams here, a lot of material. So now, on to the next step. I'll do the other side and then on to the next step. So now, I've taken this off my machine and I have this sort of funky 2 seams, one going this way, one going that way. It's making a fairly decent, nice square here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just square it up on my mat here, making sure that this is at a nice corner right here. And what I'm doing is I'm going to be marking my corner right here with my ruler, whatever. You can do it on your mat or whatever. 4 inches up. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's my 4. You can see that. And I'm just going to make a little with my pen. That's fine. I can do it just with my pen. Just in the seam allowance there. Just going to make a little mark. If you have a chalk marker, by all means. So that's 4 inches there. And now I'm going to come in 4 inches from the edge. 1, 2, 3, 4. And just make a little line there. Then I'm going to find that line there and find that line there, and I'm just going to very lightly, again, if you have a chalk marker, I have my pen, this is going to be our stitching line. We're just going to stitch, but what I'm going to do now, this is to box our corners, just a way to get it out of the way, but to secure it together, so when I take it to my machine, it's really nice and sturdy, away from my stitching line. I'm just going to secure the fabric there. Now I'm going to turn this over and do the exact same thing. Square it up nice on my mat, on my lines. I'm going to do the exact same thing to this corner. I'm going to go up 4 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4. Little line. I'm going to go over 4 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4. Little line. I'm going to join those lines with a light marker. keeping it all nice and flat. Just going to secure the body together. So when I stitch that, it's nice and flat. Now I'm going to go over and I'm going to stitch on that marked line there. Now, at the I'll bring my camera over. I'm going to stitch that. What am I going to do? I'm going to stitch it a couple times, back stitch, because again the bottom of your bag's going to have strain on it. So I'm going to stitch that, reinforce it. You can then, I don't have, I have my Juki machine here, and I don't have a satin stitch or a blind stitch or a blanket stitch or anything on it, or a zigzag. But when you stitch, you then trim away, and then you zigzag it if you want. It's in the inside, but I quite like, yeah, this point here. I quite like you would just trim that away, that box, that big hunk of corner there, and then you would either zigzag it, the finished edge. I actually put on a bias binding, and I'll show you how I do that. It really just, you can't really see it, but I love my bias binding. So I'm going to go over to my machine now, and I'll show you what I'm going to do. So here is the corner that I'm going to stitch. This is nice and laying flat. I'm going to turn this over, and I'm going to stitch on that line where we've started. Now back stitch. I'm going to stitch right on that line. I know it's a nice squared off corner, back stitch, and I'm going to go over and do it again, obviously, because there is a lot of weight on the corners, on the bottom of your bag. So I'm going to go over that stitching again. And reinforce, back stitch. My pins out because I know it's nice and straight. And I'm going to turn it around and find my other corner that I've done. There we go. Straighten it all out lovely. I know my edges are together. My seam down, my presser foot down, back stitch, and stitch right along that line. Now, what I'm going to do, I can just do it here. I'm going to grab my scissors, take these pins out. I'm going to just trim this off about a quarter of an inch away on both sides. Now that could be it for you. That would be fine. This is all inside. It's not going to make any difference. You've reinforced it. But what I like to do, I love my bias binding. Now, as you know, you've seen me use this before. But double fold bias binding, right? The one side, as you know, I've told you a million times, there's two sides to it, right? There's the wider side here and the narrower side there, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sort of turn this under. It just is a little bit funky. I'm going to put the wider side on the bottom. And I'm just going to sort of enclose this seam. I mean, just to sort of, just finish the seam off. It's a bit silly, but not really. I'm going to just tuck that, I'm just going to tuck that raw edge right up to the binding. And I'm just going to stitch along there. I'm going to cut this off maybe about ½ an inch away. So I have a sort of a neater edge. I'm going to tuck that under. I'm not stitching on the, I'm just stitching right sort of next to that seam. Coming to the end. It's a little bit funky. Just coming off there like that. And back stitch there. And actually I did make another one of these as sort of a prototype to see what I was doing. And this really does sort of hold your corners out quite nice. You know, to make a true bag bottom, because it's fairly stiff and a fairly slouchy bag. Sometimes too much slouch is not good. So there you go. Just a nice little finished off corner. edge. I'll do that to the other side, wherever the other side is. Where's the other side? Hello? Oh, there we go. Now we are ready to turn this bag inside out. But before I do, I'm just going to sort of open it up this way here, and I'm just sort of going to press that seam. I'm just going to go over to my ironing board, and I'm just going to press that seam to which way it wants to go. You have to understand that's a very heavy seam there. That's a very nice reinforced seam. I'm just going to do that on both sides. Like that seam just seems to want to go that way. It doesn't really matter. Just sort of poking that in. I find it a little bit easier at this point just to sort of get my iron in there to make a nice seam. Or you could just slot it, turn it inside out and put it on the arm of your ironing board. So I'm going to go do that now and turn my bag inside out, or right side out, I should say. So my bag is turned inside out, and as you can see, our origami hunks of triangular folded fabric is beginning to look like a bag. As you can see, my corners, my boxed corners, are really quite apparent, and it's a decent sized bag. Now, the one I have made this before, and you could, if you wanted, because it has a fairly low opening here, this is your armhole here, this is how the bag ends up looking. If you wanted to at this point, with a bit of cording or a bit of self-tie, you could by all means just stitch on to this corner, to this intersection here and this intersection here, a tie, if you wanted to secure it with a tie, to make it a little bit more, not getting into it, to secure it like that. I've chose not to, because this is basically for the beach or for just tossing some shopping in it down at the shops. So there is our bag, and I don't know, you can't feel, but even though I'm just using a regular quilting cotton, it's really nice and substantial. This seam is really, really nice and substantial. Now this here, these origami bits here, this is what makes our handle. This is what makes our handle. There's our bag right there. But what we're going to do now, we're going to put that to the side for a moment. What we're going to do now with our 4" by 7" piece of fabric, I'm going to turn this in just about 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to stitch on either end. I'm just going to stitch on either end. I'm going to iron that down, and I'm going to stitch on either end. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, and I'm just going to sew that edge together. Just going to sew that edge together about 1/4 of an inch after I top stitch my ends down, and then I'm going to turn it inside out. I have turned this end under, and I have stitched along this edge here, and of course I reinforced it twice, right? Now I don't know if any of you have ever seen this little handy dandy tool. I think I've had this for about 30 years. Hopefully you can see it. It's called a loop turner, and you can use a safety pin, but what this is, in this country, at least in America, you just stick it in. It has a little crochet hook looking thing. You just go up to the top there, and you sort of hook that on. You can hook it onto the seam over here, and it just hooks that top. Just hooks that. Oops, it won't work today, right? You put it's almost like a latched hook rug thing. And I don't really need to do it for this little bit. I could turn this inside out. It's not going to work, right? You just hook it on there, and it's not working. It's funny. Because usually I'm hooking it on to just not a finish. There you go. It just hooks on there. You do it with a safety pin, obviously. And it just pulls it right through. Pulls it right through. But it's really good, because if you had a tiny little strap, a little spaghetti strap, this little tool is awesome. And your fabric's this big, you hook that little hook on, push that up, you just pull it right through and thread it right along. You can do it's called a tube turner, or a loop turner, or a tube turner, whatever it is. But there you go. I didn't really need to do that, but that's just a little handy dandy tool that I literally have had for many, many, many years. Now we end up with this little tube here with finished edges. Nice finished edges there. Now what you're going to do now is you're going to threadle this, and what I did do this, I put a nice safety pin on the end of just one of the handles, top handle there, okay? Put a safety pin there, and I've just put this little tube on just on one side, doesn't really matter, and then just scrunched it along and pulled that safety pin Now, it doesn't matter how far this tube goes down at this point. You just want this to go all the way down, right? Now, your bag is like this, okay? And we have our 2 handles. Now, what we have here, if you can visualize it, is we have 2 squares, okay? You have 2 squares, about 1.5 inches on the edge, on these pointy handles, okay? So you sort of put it on your board there, and you have a square. Just imagine a nice square. You take your other handle, and with the same exact sort of size square, you just sort of, perhaps about 1.5 inches, about 1.5 inches, say. Well, that's about 2 inches, that's fine, or 1.5 inches, say. You're going to be stitching a square. You're going to be, well, if you need to pin it, you might have to. You're going to be, you can either stitch it one way or the other because you have to, you're sort of stitching blind. You're going to be feeling this seam here, this lump here. You're going to be stitching along there. I'm going to take you over to my sewing machine and I'll show you. Now, hopefully you can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to try to get all of this other stuff out of the way. And what you've done is you've just taken one handle and overlapped it as a square. There you go, if you can see that. You're going to keep it nice and square with the other square bit of the pointy handle underneath. You can feel, keeping this out of the way, you can feel where that square is underneath. Your machine can too, because it's a few layers thick, right? And you're just going to carefully sew along this top edge to the bottom. We're going to sew a square. And yes, I'm going to really go back and forth on this, being careful to keep it square all the while. I'd have to take that pin out. Keeping your handle nice and square, if you can see that. Get rid of this piece here. And very carefully. Mine's about 1.5 inches square. I'll take my pin out now. I can feel it. And coming back down on that square bit of handle. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to do this several times. And hopefully, yes, I have caught the bottom. I'm going to go back. Now this is where all of the stress is, so I'm going to do this several times. Making sure I'm not catching anything underneath. I did that. Now what I'm going to do now is I have my square double reinforced. I'm going to start at one point and I'm just going to go to the other point and do a nice little X. And I'm just going to keep back stitching and back stitching just to secure this little X here. This will not be seen. This will not be seen. I'm going to come back here on my, I'm going to go, let's see, I'll go back down to this point because I want to do the other bit of the X. Keeping my square nice. Go that to that corner. And then pivot and then do my other X the other way. Keeping everything nice. As you can see, I'm working just in this square. Back stitch, back stitch, back stitch. Right on through. Nice secured handle for the top of our bag. Which you're not even going to see. But boy, it's not going to come apart anytime soon. So now, what we do, let me just take my camera over and I'll show you the finished product. So I've taken this off my machine, and what we do now is here's my lovely my squared off handles, right? And we take our tube now, and making sure that the seam is sort of right in the middle of that. It's going to be scrunched up. The middle of that square, there is our bag. Hold on. So there is my lovely little market bag. This handle is up here. Here's your opening, and again, if you wanted to put a cording there, let me see, am I in the frame? There is our little bag, our finished bag. our lovely market bag, which I'll show you bigger. This is off of my, I'm trying to keep this, excuse me, I'm going to put this up here so I can show you. Yeah, so there is our lovely bag. The way it opens, it's big. It's quite capacious, as you can see there. As you can see, it's quite nice. You can see the lining, not one single raw edge. If you wanted to put your cording there to hold it together, but it has a big bottom there. We like big bottoms. Has our big squared off corners. It's slouchy, but it's not cheesy. It's nice and substantial. Again, put your tube there. There you go. Center it on your handles, and there's your market bag. There's your lovely little slouchy bag. Nice little present to make. You know, simple. Yard and a half of fabric, or 56 inches of fabric, 2 of them, and nice present to make, and it doesn't take long at all. Nice beach bag. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed that. For my patron people, and one of you will be receiving this. If you want it, again, you don't have to accept it if you win. You can just pass it along to somebody else. But for the summertime, a nice little beach bag, or taking toys to grandma's house or whatever. Go into the market. Lovely little bag there. So I hope you enjoyed that, folks. All right, see ya. Bye. Thank you again. Bye.